Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Thank you everyone for joining. Can you hear me? Okay, great. When I was a child, I was very inspired by Peanuts, Charlie Brown and Linus. And the mic doesn't work. You can't hear me? Oh, your mic doesn't work. Okay, got it. So Charlie Brown, Peanuts, Linus, I think Lucy was the one who used to give advice. She used to have this little like lemonade stand kind of thing. And it said advice for 5 cents. And I was very inspired by that. And I used to walk around with a little pad of paper and ask my siblings and other family members if they wanted advice. And I was going to give them advice for 5 cents. And I even was so excited to offer advice even without the 5 cents. People are very quick to give advice, often unsolicited advice. People aren't asking for advice necessarily, but we're willing to give it anyways. And a lot of times we have the ability to give critical advice. It's not necessarily because we're so sensitive to another person's fault or because we're being overly analytical necessarily, but because you're looking at a situation objectively as opposed to the person who is in the situation. So often you're able to see the situation accurately because you're not in it. And what you may notice is a lot of times the advice you give isn't accepted. There's a Hebrew word that everyone knows, mazel. I don't know the source of this. I heard this from my wife last week. She quoted from someone, don't remember who. Mazel is an acronym for Makom, Zman, and Lashon, place, time, and language. You may have the right advice, but you may not say it in the right place, in the right time, or the right language. Rabbi Heller, who is the Rosh Kollel of the Kollel of Lubavitch and Crown Heights, would often tell us when we were in the Kollel, a father could have the right idea, the right words to tell the child, but he doesn't say it in the right nigun, the right tune. And the wrong tune, he said, could really, really be destructive. Randall Futafas, he had a unique blessing from our Rebbe. The blessing was he should say the right word to the right person at the right time. I asked one of his grandchildren if the blessing went over to his generation, and he said, we divided the inheritance. One guy got the right time, one guy got the right person. To say the right thing to the right person at the right time is really a challenge. And the question is how to give really good advice. That advice that will actually be meaningful to the person you're talking to and assist them. What's the way to do this? So the Alter Rebbe said we should live with the times, live the time that we're in. And he didn't have in mind the style and fashion of Paris or the literature of London. Rather, he was referring to the Torah portion of the week. So let's look in the Torah portion this week and let's see how we could glean from this week's Torah portion the best way to give advice. In this week's Torah portion, there's a discussion about someone who kills someone else by accident. So Torah says that if, let's say, a man named Reuven killed someone else named Shimon by accident, the Torah says that there is permission given to relatives of the deceased to avenge the blood of the one who was killed. And Reuven, who really is not liable to a death penalty because he did it by accident, he is allowed to go to a city of refuge. He's allowed to go to the city in exile, and he stays in that city until the death of the high priest, and then he is permitted to leave the city. On the surface, it seems that his going to the city is just as a protection for himself from the avenger. But let's say there is no avenger. let's say there's no relatives of Shimon. Shimon doesn't have any relatives. Or let's say Reuben says, I could take him on, let him come get me. So does he have to go to the city or not? So the answer is that he does have to go to the city, because the purpose of going to the city isn't just to protect him from the avenger. Rather, yes, sir, Beryl. Hello? Yes, I'm middle of the class. Yeah, I'm middle of a class now. Okay, I'll take care of it. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So he goes to the city not only because he has to protect himself from the avenger, but he goes there also for the purpose of tikkun. Tikkun is a word that means to rectify, to make something whole again. He did something, albeit by accident, but the Arizal says that even a mistake that's done by accident indicates something that's inside that needs to be rectified. And he needs to go to the city of refuge. And by going there, he's able to make whole again his own soul. A mitzvah is something that God gave us that makes the energy of the world whole, that lifts up the energy of the world. And conversely, a sin damages the creation of Hashem, the creation of God, the world. And this person, because he had done this act of murder, albeit inadvertently, he needs to go to this city to rectify himself. It's not like he's considered a pariah because he killed someone and he has to be sent away and he can't ever be brought back into society. It's not that he has no mission in this world anymore because he has done this act. There have been many, many wonderful people that have unfortunately killed people by accident. Wasn't their fault. And the Torah doesn't consider him to be someone who has killed as a murderer or pariah. And the truth is that there is no such thing as someone who does not have a sense of mission, even someone who is a murderer, who has killed someone on purpose. I used to be a chaplain in the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown and the federal prison in Terminal Island in Long Beach. And I often was asked if I wanted to hear from the other chaplains who would visit, do I want to hear what this person had done? And the rule of thumb is you don't want to know what the person has done because you want to treat the person like a person. You don't want to look at them through their crime. You want to see them as an individual. But on one occasion, this guy who was in solitary confinement in downtown had done something so horrible that a colleague, the imam who had brought me into the visit this person, he encouraged me to consider knowing what the person had done. And I said, and I don't want to know. He said, you probably do. And he proceeded to tell me what this person had done. And I don't want to repeat what the guy had done. It's something that, like, you don't want to use the elephant to tell the color gray, because once you say the elephant, you lose you lose the parable. You're thinking about the elephant. So I don't want to go back there and tell you what the person had done, but something that's so horrific that I didn't really know what I should do, because it just was so terrible. So there was an elder chassid who was visiting Los Angeles at the time. His name was Erheshke Dubravsky, all of shalom, a brilliant chassid, brilliant chassidim who had no airs about themselves, who just knew life and knew Torah, knew, if you will, they knew God. And I happened to give this man a ride home from the synagogue. He needed a ride. He was a little bit elderly at the time. And I asked him, what do I do about this guy? This guy did this and this thing. What should I do? Without batting an eyelash, he says, teach him how to read some Hebrew and let him recite Psalms. He knew when I didn't, that doesn't matter what the person did. There is always a road back home. There's no such thing as not having a road back home. There is a GPS, there is a God's positioning system. And although it may have to recalculate, there's different kinds of missions. You could choose the straight mission of going straight forward towards what God wants you to do and do the mitzvah that God asks you to do. Or it's possible to make a step backwards and go the wrong way. And eventually that leads you to a deeper bond with God through repentance and a yearning to cleave to God because of the distance the sin created. In this week's Torah portion, it talks about 42 journeys the Jewish people took since they departed from Egypt until they arrived in Israel. And some of those journeys aren't a step forward. Some of them were mistakes. And yet the Torah calls all of them journeys forward, because even when a Jew makes a mistake and goes a step backward, he's also being guided by the GPS system, by God's positioning system. And yet, yes, there's a harder mission now, but he's chosen a harder mission because he's made that mistake. In other words, there's no such thing as being off of and not having a mission. That's something which the American prison system and international prison system doesn't really recognize. The Torah doesn't subscribe to a prison system. The idea of the man going to the city of refuge isn't to be imprisoned, not because his life is now meaningless. It's the opposite. When the person goes to the city of refuge, the Torah says that all of his needs have to be taken care of, including if he has a teacher. The teacher is a prestigious person. That person, that teacher of his, has to go to the city of refuge because he needs a teacher. A man needs a teacher, he needs a mentor. So if he is sent to exile, the teacher is sent to exile there with him. Because the Torah doesn't look at him as having mission as having stopped. His mission continues. He has a mission. The mission may have changed because of the sin. He may have to work harder to rectify and work deeper and reach a higher kind of light because of the darkness that he's taken. But there is a mission for him nonetheless. The Rebbe gave the following example once. A murderer who is on death row and is about to experience capital punishment is thirsty, and he's given a cup of water to drink. When he's given that cup of water, he needs to say the blessing shahakol. He needs to say a blessing, although he's a murderer and he's about to be killed by the Jewish court, and it seems to be that his life is forfeit, his life is meaningless, and yet, but right now he's alive, right now he's thirsty. God needs, so to speak, and he wants to hear a blessing from this mouth of this murderer. There's a beautiful teaching. I don't know the source of this. Ki ata shomea tfilas kol peh. You hear the prayers of all mouths. The Hebrew word peh, mouth, could be written without the dot, without the dot in the letter peh, and it comes out. You hear the prayers of kol feh, of all those people that you look at them and you look at them and you are disgusted by the way that someone behaves. You say feh. But God doesn't look at it that way. Ata shomea tfilas kol feh. God hears the prayers of each of us, no matter where we are. So this murderer needs to say the blessing before he has that drink of water. I'm making myself thirsty. L'chaim, l'chaim. I said a bracha before. So the answer to our question, does he need to go to the city of refuge? Yes, because he needs a rectification for his soul. By him going to the city of refuge, it is painful to go to the city. It's painful, as the Sefer HaChinuch, the book of education, writes. The reason why it's so painful is because he's away from all of his friends. He's now in this new foreign land. It's difficult, and that he's in a position now where he's able to not just be protected from the avenger. Forget about the avenger. If there is no avenger, he goes to the city to rectify and purify his own soul. The Torah is called the Torah of kindness. In the language of Eshes Chayil, which we will recite tomorrow night, a woman of valor of King Solomon in Proverbs, we say Torah's chesed al lashona. There is a Torah of kindness on her tongue. The Torah is called the Torah of kindness because even the punishments of the Torah are kind. They're always with the objective of giving us something, of helping us, of lifting up our souls. It's not about hurting us and bringing us down. The goal of the Torah's punishment itself is to uplift and to cleanse the soul. So too, this person who killed someone inadvertently, he is being sent by God on a mission to the city to rectify, to purify himself. It's a gift that God is giving him. Now, on the way to get to this city, interesting halacha, it says, Vishilashta, you should make this road to the Ari Miklat in threes. Maimonides says what this means is the road has to be a very broad road. There's no GPS system of Google or MapQuest or whatever. He has to go to the city of refuge and he has to know how to get there. So the Torah says that there's a couple of things that this road toward the city of refuge had to have. The Torah wants to make it as easy and clear as possible for him to get to the city. In connecting this to the previous theme, the Torah looks at him as a person, and he has value, and he has meaning, and there's something important about him getting to that city, and not just to protect himself, but it's something intrinsically valuable of him going there. And the Torah says the road has to be 32 amot wide. 32 amot is, and each amma is roughly 1.5 feet or 2 feet, about 60 feet. That's how wide the road has to be. In addition, there has to be signs on the road. And there, on every intersection, there has to be a sign that says, Miklat, Miklat, this is the road towards the city of refuge. And there aren't allowed to be any mountains or valleys or rivers across this road. If there's a river, the Torah says you have to build a bridge. Help the guy get to the city. Make sure that there is a bridge. If there's a river, there's a bridge. There shouldn't be any mountains or valleys. Help the guy get there. And this is something which is relevant to each of us because the concept of murder in the Torah is taking godly energy and using it the wrong direction. And the idea of the city of refuge is finding a way to lift yourself back up. And the Torah says, just like we're commanded to make signs with those words, refuge, so too God assists us and guides us and helps us to go to the place that we need to go. God doesn't just tell us, hey, this is the way of life, you should choose it. As he tells us in the Torah, there's a path of life and there's a path of death and you should choose life. God assists us and he guides us and gives us signs and assistance to make sure that we'll choose the right way. He gives us a wide road and he gives us assistance to get there. He doesn't just leave us to our own crazy thoughts and devices and bad moods. He gives us assistance. So just as God gives us assistance, God commands us to give assistance to others. In the words of the Torah, it says, in front of a blind man, you should not leave a stumbling block. Someone who is a blind man, which means someone who does not know a way to go, you can't give a stumbling block, which means you have to give them advice that is good for them. You have to think about who they are and where they are and what's going on in their life and make sure the advice that you're giving is good for them. It's interesting, the analogy that Talmud gives for this precept. The Talmud says, if someone has a donkey and he's considering to buy a field, and you shouldn't tell him to sell the donkey to buy the field, why not? You might think that that there's something better about a donkey than a field, but that's not always the case. It could be sometimes a donkey is better than the field. What's the Torah mean over here? The Torah is saying that it's a not so relevant to our discussion, but the point is that it's a scenario where you have some kind of self-interest and you're trying to get this donkey out of this person. You want him to sell to someone else, you can get it. So Torah says, even if it's good advice for him, it's good advice. He needs the field. But if you're seeking to gain as well, and it's not about him, then you're putting a stumbling block in front of them. Although it's good advice and something that he needs to hear. But if it's something that you're gaining as well from it, it's not about him, it's not the advice he needs to hear. Advice has to be given with empathy. That's number one. there has to be, you have to feel the other person's needs, what they're going through, in order to be able to give them advice. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, he was a child. He used to play a game with his brother, Reb Zalman Aaron. The game was Rebbe and Chassid. One day, the younger brother, the Rashab, who later became the Rebbe, was playing this game, and he was the Chassid in the game, and his brother was the Rebbe. And he told his brother, I need a tikkun, I need something to rectify my soul. Why? Because I eat walnuts on Shabbos. And although halachically it's not so bad to eat walnuts on Shabbos, but the Alter Rebbe says because of the laws of separating on Shabbos, it's preferable not to eat the walnuts. So he asked his brother, what should I do? So his brother said to him, you should always pray with his siddur. So the little boy tells his older brother, you're not a Rebbe and your advice won't work. He says, what do you mean? Why are you saying that? He said, because a Rebbe, before he gives advice, he sighs. And you didn't sigh. In order to give advice to someone else, to stand in their shoes. There's a saying in America, don't give someone advice until you walk a mile in their shoes. You know why? Because first of all, you're a mile away. Second of all, you have their shoes. But seriously, in order to be able to give advice, you have to stand in the other person's shoes and feel how they're feeling. It has to be done in a way that you want the other person to hear, you want him to enjoy what you're saying. Otherwise, why would he want to listen to you? When I was a child, Dr. Weiss, Sein Gesund, the Rebbe's doctor, used to often visit Worcester, Massachusetts. And he was once there with his family in our Shabbos table. And there's actually last week's parsha. And I saw everyone in his family able to enunciate everything they said so clearly and distinctly. And I felt at the time that my voice just didn't project well. And it bothered me. And he's a very prominent doctor. So I asked the doctor, Dr. Weiss, what should I do? I can't express myself. My words don't project. I see everyone in your family, they enunciate this so clearly. I can't do it. So he told me, sing a nigunim more often. Sing songs more often. There's such sweet advice in the language of Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. It wasn't just he gave me good advice, just exercise your voice a little bit and exercise your vocal cords. Just sing a nigun, enjoy life. You know, it's pleasurable, enjoyable advice. Sing, let yourself play. Advice has to not just suit the one who's giving the advice. Advice has to be about the one that's getting the advice, not about you, not about you giving the best advice. It's about the person who's getting the advice. That's the whole point. The Rebbe Marash, actually, I'm not sure, maybe it was the middle of a night where he was having meeting after meeting called Yechidus, personal private meetings between Rebbe and Chassid, one after another. He had to stop him. He couldn't continue because he would literally sweat from all these meetings. And he explained to give advice to someone, he had to take off his own clothing and put on the clothing of the person he was speaking to. And doing that one after another, each person taking off his clothing, put on other person's clothing, is very, very, it takes energy out of you. So the Marash was telling us that in order to give someone advice, you need to think about the other person and what they need, where they are, and have empathy for them. But it's not enough just to have empathy. It's also just like we read about the cities of refuge, it has to be a wide road. So too, when you give advice to someone, you want the other person to be able to right away practice the advice. You don't want them just to like say, yes, it's a good idea, and then move to the next thing. You want to put into a bite-sized package so that they could actually eat it and go and run with it. For example, let's say you know someone who needs to do more exercise, like me. So I could tell someone, hey, you need to do more exercise. Okay, that's true. But if I told him, there's a gym that's right nearby, okay, that's more relevant. If I add it to not only is there a gym, but I know what time would work for you considering your schedule. If I told him there's a promotion right now, and once you buy membership in that gym, you're going to want to use it. So if I added those details, I haven't just given him good advice, I've given him direction. He now has something to do. It's in his hands. So the least we can do when someone seeks our advice is to see where they are, make a wide road, give them detailed advice so that they can have actual direction of where to go. And that's why the soul came to this world. The soul came to this world. Every soul, as Rebbe told a friend of mine, every soul in our generation came to this world to inspire another soul. So that means your soul and my soul is meant to be a signpost, a live signpost, not just a signpost that just stands there and says there is a path of life and there's a path of death, but a signpost that's alive and moves around. According to halacha, the signpost can just be stationary, but according to the inner meaning of what a signpost is, what God wants each of us to be, we need to be alive and seek other people and actively look for people that need advice, need direction, and help them go towards a path that leads to life. And all of us, every one of us, we all need assistance from God. And the best way to get assistance from God is by assisting his children. In the language of the Baal Shem Tov said, love a Jew and God will love you. Bring a Jew close to you and God will bring you close to him. Do a Jew a favor and God will do you a favor. So that's the bottom line. To give another person good advice, if they feel where they are, that they're going to want to hear what you have to say, put yourself in their shoes and make it actionable. Give it a wide road. Make it they're able to actually run with what you have to say. And Mitzvah Shem, that way, one more thing, big thing. Before you give someone advice, the Rebbe says you should recite a psalm and ask God to speak from your heart. Rabbeinu Tam writes in his book Sefer HaYashar, words that come from the heart enter the heart. So praying to God that you should speak from your heart is first thing you should do before you can think about giving someone else advice. That you should actually be able to reach into your heart and share with another. As the Rebbe told, I mentioned Rabbi Dabrowski before, one of his sons is an emissary of the Rebbe in Texas. He once brought to the Rebbe one of his congregants who asked the Rebbe the following question. He was a miner, and he noticed an interesting thing about mining, that when you mine for diamonds, on the tip of the drill there's a diamond. So he asked the Rebbe, what does this ironic phenomenon mean? And the Rebbe said he has a similar phenomenon in his own profession, in the Rebbe's profession. The Rebbe says, I send my chassidim around the world, and I ask them to reach out to other people. I hope they use their diamond to find the diamond in others. Which means, simply, I think, in order for me to be a live signpost, I need to pray to God that I'm talking and communicating from my neshama, and that way, not only will the words and the advice and the soul connection help the other person, but that also brings God's blessing to me to go in the right way. So, l'chaim, we're entering now the month of Av. The Shabbos blesses the month of Av. The Talmud says when the month of Av comes in, you're supposed to decrease in joy. But the Hasidic masters explain that what this really means is we have to decrease in all the negativity of the month of Av by adding in joy, in the kosher way, in the Torah's way, by making celebrations. When you conclude a book of Torah, the Talmud says, when you ever conclude a book of Torah, that day becomes a day of celebration. So we need to find a way to reveal the inner joy that is in the month of Av, because God willing, Mashiach comes tonight. The month of Av doesn't just become a month of celebration, but it becomes the greatest celebration of all time. As the Talmud says, why did the lion destroy the lion in the month of the lion? It's only in order that the lion should rebuild the lion in the month of the lion. The lion refers to God, and the temple is called the lion, and the king who destroyed the temple is also called the lion, and the month of Av is also called the month of the lion. So God allowed the king to destroy the temple in the month of the lion in order that God should rebuild the temple in the month of the lion. So the month of Av is a month of tremendous joy, because that's the month when God revealed his love for us. Didn't reveal his love for us, but he did whatever he did out of his love for us in order to bring us to the goal, to the point, to the dream of all of us, dream of all the Jewish people of all of history, so that there should be a transformation of all negativity to good. So the way we bring this about now is by learning the laws of how to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem and concluding books of Torah to bring out the inner joy of this month. So Hashem shall help all of us to have a real joyous Av, because Mashiach should come tonight, and you should see the joy of the month of Av. L'chaim, l'chaim. A good Shabbos, everyone.